I don't think I've actually said this out loud, but I never watched Jimmy Kimmel until last night. Last night was the first time that I actually listened to him in that opening monologue for 17 minutes. And at the end of that 17 minutes, I went, this is the longest that I do believe I've ever listened to Jimmy Kimmel. But I highly recommend you go out of your way to watch it. I'm not allowed to play any of his clips for copyright reasons, but I really did enjoy the opening monologue. I thought that he handled it really well, and I thought he said a lot of good things that I'm going to touch on just a little bit. But I just realized that I had never really watched him. I was never a fan of late night TV. I got to be honest with you. I never watched Letterman. I never watched Leno. I never watched any of them. I don't watch TV, first of all. And second of all, I've just never been a fan of the late night format. There's just something about it. It's just never really been my thing. I would watch it if somebody I liked was going to be on there. If there was a musician I was following, like say a Jason Isbell. If it's like, hey, Jason Isbell's going to be on a late night show tonight, it's like, okay, cool, I'm tuning in to watch that. But I've never been the type to sit around and watch that stuff. It's just never been my thing. But I really started paying close attention to Jimmy Kimmel when I realized that the government was leaning on him, and we had a president who was leaning on him and his network to get him fired and silencing him for a joke that they disagreed with, or I should say that they couldn't take a joke. And before I get into talking about what Kimmel said in his opening monologue, it's funny to me how that they call liberals snowflakes. They say we can't take a joke, but at the same time, we're radical left lunatics. Like we're violent extremists, but we're also snowflakes. Kind of like how that Joe Biden, don't know where he is, but yet Joe Biden is like a criminal mastermind. They can't never make up their mind which way they want to go with us. One minute we're the extreme, radical, dangerous left, and the next minute we're just a bunch of sissies that can't take a joke. But now the script is flipped, and they are the sissies who clearly can't take a joke, and they have the President of the United States going after a comedian, and that's what has got me to paying more attention to Jimmy Kimmel than I ever have before. And again, it wasn't that I had anything against Jimmy Kimmel. I just never was a fan of that type of format. But getting into what he said in his monologue, and again, I can't play it for copyright reasons, but he didn't apologize, and he didn't back down, and I appreciate that. I'm really glad that he didn't do that. I was sitting there going, please, listen, Lenny Bruce, and I'm so glad he shouted out Lenny Bruce, but I'm sitting there thinking Lenny Bruce would not bend the knee, Carlin wouldn't bend the knee, please, for the love of God, don't bend the knee, and he didn't. But he explained himself. He explained himself in a reasonable way, and I understand that everyone's emotions was running high after what happened to Charlie Kirk, and a lot of people were throwing stones at each other before the evidence was rolling in. But I think reasonable people could listen to what Jimmy Kimmel had to say and go, okay, even if I got mad at him for a second, even if I thought it was ill-timed or whatever opinion I had of it, you could tell that he meant well and he was sincere with what he had to say. And he was also sincere with what he had to say when he talked about free speech and talked about how that he said, this show isn't important. He even said it about his own show. He said, this show is not important. That's not what this is about. It's really about the First Amendment at the end of the day, and it's about allowing people to be able to express themselves freely. That's what we're all doing. And I've said many times that I'm just a guy that's sitting here reacting to the news. I always tell y'all that I'm not an expert. I always tell y'all to not take your medical advice from me. I'm just a dude that's sitting here trying to make sense of things. And I have my own take on it. And I like certain politicians and I dislike certain politicians. I agree with certain politicians and I disagree with certain politicians. And if I disagree with a politician that you don't like, I'm going to voice it very loudly. And you are free to turn and do the same. I never one time said that no one should be allowed to criticize Joe Biden. I would have never supported comedians being banned for making fun of Joe Biden or poking fun at Joe Biden. I've always stood up and always believed in satire. And satire is the use of humor, irony, and exaggeration to expose the stupidity of someone's beliefs. And yes, I've memorized that definition because I've used it many times when I've tried to explain that satire is something that goes back to the beginning of this country. There has always been cartoons written from George Washington all the way till now. It evolved into late night TV. It evolved into YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. It evolved into those things. But it's always been people poking fun at the establishment and poking fun at their leaders and exposing the stupidity of their beliefs. And you're free to agree with me and you're free to disagree with me. But the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law. And I always think that's very important when we read that. We always say Congress shall make no law because that's actually how it's supposed to be. The president's name ain't even mentioned there because the president isn't supposed to be leaning on people like this. That's not how the government was ever supposed to work. But we have a president who, before Jimmy Kimmel, I want to point this out, before Jimmy Kimmel said what he said, made the joke that got him fired for a minute, before he made that, Trump was already calling for him to be done. And he's calling for Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers and The View and anyone else that disagrees with him. And he says he's going to investigate The View. How do you investigate The View? What is there to investigate? They don't like you. They voice it. So what? Get over it. Stop calling us snowflakes if you can't listen to Whoopi Goldberg without getting all upset and in your feels. You know what I mean? Don't ever call me a snowflake again if you're going to get upset and offended over Whoopi Goldberg. You know what I mean? It's one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever seen. But we have a president now who is leaning on comedians, leaning on networks, and here it is. I mean, I'm going to bring this up now that now that Jimmy Kimmel is back, which is not being played on every network, but this is what the president had to say about a comedian because he can't take a joke. And he cannot stand criticism. That's the main thing. He's so thin-skinned that he just cannot take criticism. But it says, I can't believe ABC fake news, has to start off that way, gave Jimmy Kimmel his job back. The White House was told by ABC that his show was canceled. Something happened then and now because his audience is gone and his talent was never there. Again, folks, I'm just going to butt in before I continue to read this and say this is not a game show. This is not Celebrity Apprentice. You're not judging talent. You're not there to be the talent judge. That's not who you are. You're there to run the country, be the President of the United States, and be strong enough to take criticism from a comedian, be strong enough to have fun poked at you. That's how it's always been. This is not the Celebrity Apprentice. Why he thinks it is, I have no clue. But it's not about whether you think they have talent or you think they should be fired or not. Why would they want someone back who does so poorly, who's not funny, and who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage? He is yet another arm of the DNC, and to the best of my knowledge, that would be a major illegal campaign contribution. Folks, there's nothing wrong with comedians embracing a political party. And there's nothing wrong with networks being an arm of a party, because we could definitely say that Fox News is the arm of Donald Trump. So it's absolutely ridiculous to me that he would, say that with a straight face. Whenever he says that whole, they're the arm of the Democratic Party, I'm over here going, buddy, there's nothing illegal about backing a political party that you agree with. That's ridiculous. So anyway, he says, I think we're going to test ABC out on this. Let's see how we do. Last time I went after them. Now he's saying out loud, I went after them. He's saying out loud that he, the President of the United States, is weaponizing the government against them. That's what he's essentially saying here. And he says, the last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. For all you that says, he donates his salary, he loves his country so much, he just donated, he could be on a yacht somewhere, but he loves us so much. The dude has raked in more money as president than probably any president. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. So yeah, then he goes on to say, this one sounds even more lucrative. So yeah, now I can lean on them again, and they'll cave again, and I'll get even more money. A true bunch of losers. Let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. I know whataboutisms is I don't like doing them, but it's just we live in a world where if Joe Biden had said let Jesse Waters rot in his bad ratings, they would have been demanding an apology. They would have been demanding that Jesse Waters get a spot at the White House, his face on Mount Rushmore. And the people at Fox News have got away with saying so much and stoking the flames. And by the way, they've been sued in the past for defamation. They've had to fork over money and admit they were lying to their audience. But they're clearly now Donald Trump's arm, and he sees nothing wrong with that. We've never really been here before. We've dipped our toes in the water, but we've not been as full blown into this as we are right now. I highly recommend digging in a little bit, and because again, I can't play a lot of these videos for copyright reasons, but if you dig into where Richard Nixon was going after Norman Lear, the dude that made all the satirical shows like All in the Family, Sanford and Son, Good Times, all those shows back then. Norman Lear was the guy that created those. And Richard Nixon hated him, and he wanted All in the Family taken off the air. And I got to make this point really quick. I'm kind of getting off subject. But there's a lot of conservatives in MAGA these days. It's like, man, these people today, they're a bunch of snowflakes. They couldn't watch Archie Bunker. Actually, conservatives hated Archie Bunker when he was being made back then because Archie Bunker was being played by Carol O'Connor, who was a bleeding heart liberal. And that dude on Twitter that you get pissed off at all the time named Rob Reiner, he was playing his son-in-law Meathead. So the show was satire. It was there to use humor, irony, and exaggeration to expose the stupidity of someone's beliefs. And if it came out today and Alec Baldwin was playing Archie Bunker, Donald Trump would be calling for it to be taken off the air. If Jimmy Kimmel was playing Meathead, he would be calling them losers and telling them to get it off the air. But Richard Nixon definitely tried to go down this path. And by today's standards, he's really tame and lame if you study it. But Richard Nixon did try these things. He was saying these things behind closed doors, but now Donald Trump is saying them right out loud. And the FCC, Brendan Carr, they're saying it right out loud. Like Jimmy Kimmel said in his monologue, he said, used to get these people to say this type of thing, to get a mob boss to say this type of thing, you would have to plant a microphone in a deli and listen outside in a van. And these people are saying it on a podcast. These people are putting it out on social media. But this conversation to me has never been about Jimmy Kimmel. Because I've never been a fan of late night TV. But I am absolutely for their right to express themselves, to challenge the status quo, and to mock and make fun of whoever they want to. That's free speech. And we had to be set and lectured by the people for years telling us what free speech meant. And now suddenly they're all up in their feels and mad at Jimmy Kimmel, and they're supporting this. And there has been Republicans like Ted Cruz and a couple others. It's like, hey, this isn't going to work well for us. It's not going to end up good. And it won't. We can't continue to throw stones at one another in this manner. Put your ideas out into the world. Say what you feel. Just don't threaten anyone. Don't do anything illegal. It's not illegal to criticize the president. It's not illegal to mock or make fun. Those things aren't illegal. They may be tasteless at times. You're to judge that. You can judge it however you want to. But these things, expressing ourselves is not illegal. So we put our ideas out into the world. You put your ideas out into the world, and we meet you at the ballot box, and we see who wins. That's how it should be. But unfortunately, folks, we're living through at a time that I don't know what it's going to be like on the other side. I just hope we get there, and I appreciate y'all so much for your support here on the channel. I do believe that we will come through this, and we'll make it out the other side one way or the other.